Welcome to the Full Moon Film Buff, episode 182. We're going to return to the outer limits of DIY filmmaking and discuss Werewolf and the Witch from 2007. I rented this from Scarecrow Video. I had not seen this before. As always, we start with the prominent crew and cast. You can find links to a more complete credit list in the show notes, usually not this time. Written and directed by David "The Rock" Nelson. We first covered David "The Rock" Nelson when we discussed Miss Werewolf. We've also seen his work in Conrad Brooks versus the Werewolf. The cast includes Janet Lynn as the Witch, David "The Rock" Nelson as the Werewolf, billed as Rocky Nelson, Joel D. Wincoop as Agent Bob Crusher, Forrest J. Ackerman as Mr. Monster, billed as Forey Ackerman, Fred Olin Ray, billed as Fred Olin Ray, Conrad Brooks as Conrad Brooks, Roger Corman as Roger Corman, and Rich Cause as Svengoolie, billed as Svengoolie. Like Nelson, we saw Janet Lynn in Miss Werewolf and Conrad Brooks versus the Werewolf. Joel D. Wincoop reprises his role as CIA agent Bob Crusher from Light of Blood, thus creating a wider Bad Werewolf movie universe. We first covered Forrest J. Ackerman when we discussed Mad Monster Party. This is similar footage of his appearance in Miss Werewolf. We first covered Fred Olin Ray when we discussed Tomb of the Werewolf. We literally just discussed another film of his with Direwolf. Conrad Brooks was obviously discussed when we covered Conrad Brooks versus the Werewolf. We first discussed King of B movies, Roger Corman, when we covered The Wasp Woman. We saw the same footage reused from Miss Werewolf. Rich Cause is the Chicago television legend best known as Svengoolie, America's longest running and now only nationally syndicated horror host. Cause began his career in 1970 at age 18 as a writer and voice performer on Chicago's Screaming Yellow Theater, home of Jerry Bishop's original Svengoolie. When Bishop left in 1973, Cause took over the role as son of Svengoolie. Sporting corpse makeup, a top hat, and a loud plaid jacket, he delivered corny puns, rubber chicken gags, song parodies, and sketches with characters like Kerwin and Zalman T. Tombstone, while screening classic Universal monster movies. The show became a Saturday night institution and a ratings juggernaut for the independent station. Budget cuts ended the run in 1986, but Cause revived the character, now simply Svengoolie, in 1994. In 2011, MeTV launched the program nationally, making Cause the first horror host to go from local UHF staple to coast-to-coast broadcast. As of 2025, the show is in its 46th overall year, its 31st consecutive season in Chicago, and its 15th year nationwide. Over the decades, Cause has earned 7 Chicago Midwest Emmys, the National Television Academy's Silver Circle honor, and in 2024 became the first horror host to receive a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. He has released comedy albums, voiced countless commercials, and made cameo appearances on shows like Chicago Fire. Still writing jokes, painting sets, and performing live each week at the age of 73, Cause remains fiercely private off camera and fiercely beloved on it. He signs autographs, stays sick, and closes every episode with the immortal line, "If you're in the Chicagoland area, tune in next week. And if you're not, well, move." In an age when local TV characters vanish overnight, Rich Cause has kept a rubber chicken throwing, coffin dwelling ghoul alive for half a century and turned Svengoolie into America's last great horror host, Berwyn. Here's the thing. Nelson reuses and repurposes footage ruthlessly, which means if you've seen one of his films, you've seen most of his films. They actually get longer and longer as he accumulates shots to string together under new voiceovers. This one is a staggering 3 hours and 20 plus minutes long. Pick one of his shorter films if you want to taste what David "The Rock" Nelson is cooking. I'm a little worried about how long Howl of the Werewolf will be once I get to it. As a tidbit, to quote Nelson, for the first time in his career, the werewolf drives a car. It's not true, since Scooby-Doo and the Reluctant Werewolf is a thing, and Werewolf Shaggy drives an entire race, but Nelson sure believed it. So let's cover the synopsis as best we can. We start with a very long opening short called Janet versus the Werewolf. The most interesting part is when they incorporate a seemingly real injury where Janet falls and busts up her elbow. After 35 minutes of shorts, ads, and Nelson showing us his monster movie memorabilia, we get to the film proper. We begin with footage reused and repurposed from Conrad Brooks versus the Werewolf, explicitly making this a direct sequel. A witch shows up, steals the werewolf's corpse, and resurrects the monster as her servant. He goes on a rampage and takes a long shower before going sightseeing around Chicago. A favorite little scene is when he searches a cemetery for headstones, sharing the last names with horror film icons. Then, things get self-referential when the witch commands the werewolf to track down and eliminate people who have given negative reviews to David the Rock Nelson's movie, Conrad Brooks versus the Werewolf. Oh, and reviewers who didn't give him any publicity at all. Detective Rocky ultimately stops this supernatural killing spree. The last third of the film involves the werewolf searching for Conrad Brooks to finish what they started. It ends fairly drastically as Nelson intercuts footage of a building demolition crew to create the illusion of the werewolf being buried in rubble. Like all his effects, Nelson's werewolf transformation sequences are deliberately lo-fi and echo the dissolves of the black and white universal tradition. But Nelson doesn't have the tools to create dissolves or the makeup talent. Instead, he relies on hard cuts between shots. These sequences showcase Nelson's commitment to practical effects, creating a distinctly amateur but enthusiastic aesthetic that defines his filmmaking style. The look is barely an adequate Halloween costume. The film largely ignores traditional werewolf mythology in favor of its own internal logic. The werewolf serves the witch's commands rather than being driven by lunar cycles or primal urges. I don't recall a mention of silver, but I could have missed something. This time, the werewolf is crushed to death by rubble. This subversion of classic werewolf tropes allows Nelson to focus on his satirical targets rather than adhere to genre conventions. The creature becomes a tool for metatextual commentary rather than a source of traditional horror. So, at the risk of waking up with claw marks on my door, let's talk about the single most emotionally radioactive relationship in creative life, the artist and the critic. This film is pure chaos. A witch sends a slobbering werewolf to maul everyone who ever left a bad review of Nelson's earlier movies. But underneath the rubber mask and the thrift store costume, this is the most literal revenge fantasy an indie filmmaker has ever put on screen. What if you really could sick a monster on the people who trashed your art? Nelson doesn't just fantasize about it. He casts himself as the wounded creator, the rampaging beast, and the detective trying to stop the carnage. It's a one-man psychodrama where the filmmaker literally becomes every side of his own grudge. And man, is it relatable. In 2007, when IMDb message boards and early YouTube comments were the Wild West, a single brutal review could feel like a death sentence for an underground artist with no safety net. Nelson took that pain, glued some yak hair to it, a hockey mask, and externalized it. We've seen tamer versions of this fantasy. M. Night Shyamalan in Lady in the Water kills off a smug film critic with a lawn monster because, yeah, the guy kind of had it coming. Pixar's Ratatouille, same year, gives us Anton Ego, a terrifying food critic who can end careers with a pen stroke until a perfect dish makes him cry and write the best review of his life. That's the polite revenge. Force the hater to admit that they were wrong. Nelson skips straight to the mauling. There's no redemption, just cathartic, deranged payback. But here's where I have to put on my critic hat. Please don't send the werewolf after me. Good criticism isn't the enemy. Critics are culture's immune system. We call out the lazy, the harmful, and the dishonest. We champion the weird little movies that no one else notices. Without us, there's no canon, no real conversation, just endless echo chambers where nothing ever gets better because nobody's allowed to say, hey, this kind of sucks. The healthy version is symbiotic. Critic challenges, artist answers with better work, repeat. The Werewolf and the Witch actually gets that in its own cracked way. Several of the real critics who panned him even show up on camera to take their punishment with a grin. The revenge fantasy collapses into self-aware comedy. The monster becomes the punchline, and Nelson wins simply by refusing to take the hate too seriously. So, yeah, every creator has daydreamed about unleashing the beast on a bad review. David the Rock Nelson just grabbed a camcorder and did it for 148 glorious, well, more than that, unrestrained minutes. The result is messy, unhinged, and utterly alive. And honestly, I can't help but love it, even while admitting that it is not good. Just maybe don't one-star his YouTube page, okay? I really like my jugular right where it is. So let's move on and tackle something else. Picture a hot summer night in 1957. You're at the drive-in, speaker on the window, waiting for the second feature. Suddenly, the screen explodes with marching snacks, popcorn, hot dog, soda, candy bar, all singing that immortal jingle. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat. If that tune is in your head right now, congratulations. You have been brainwashed by the most successful ad in movie history. These little interludes, bombastic trailers, and cheerfully pushy concession spots were the heartbeat of going to the pictures for almost 100 years. They didn't just sell the next film or popcorn. They turned the whole night into a ritual. That buttery smell wafting through the lobby, that's not an accident. It's engineered nostalgia. Quick personal aside here. Back when I was in film school and had started dissecting every frame instead of just enjoying them, one of my professors gave me the best advice I ever got. He said, if you just want to love movies again, make real buttered popcorn at home. That smell flips the switch from analytical mode back to kid in the theater mode. It still works to this day. Try it. So let's go back all the way to the beginning. The first trailer wasn't even for a movie. In 1913, a theater ad guy named Nils Granlund slapped some behind-the-scenes footage of a Broadway show after the feature. Audiences actually stuck around for the credits back then, so it worked. They literally trailed the film, hence the name. By the late 30s, however, audiences had stopped and theaters wised up and moved the trailers to the front. Then the National Screen Service took over and gave us the classic style. Booming voice of God narrator, flying text, and promises that whatever was coming was the most terrifying, shocking, thrilling motion picture of your lifetime. Pure Carnival Barker energy. While trailers sold the future, snack bar ads sold the present. The Depression nearly killed theaters. Popcorn saved them. Cheap, fragrant, addictive, and after wartime sugar rationing, basically the only game in town. By the 50s, concessions were 40% of the profit, and today it comes closer to 80 or 90%. To move product during intermission, theaters ran Snipes. The undisputed champion, the 1957 Filmax Studios classic, Let's All Go to the Lobby, animated by Dave Fleischer of Popeye fame. So iconic that in 2000, the Library of Congress put it in the National Film Registry, the only ad ever to get that honor. These things created shared memory. Generations grew up with those same dancing hot dogs, the same countdown clocks, and the same singing candy bars. They made the theater feel communal. Lights dim, organ swells, or drive-in speakers crackling, and suddenly everyone's humming along. The ripple effects were huge. Trailers became their own art form. Don LaFontaine, In a World, the Jaws campaign inventing the summer blockbuster. Snack ads turned moviegoing into a full sensory experience. Even now, when intermissions are mostly gone and trailers live on YouTube now, the ghosts are still there. Alamo Drafthouse runs vintage Snipes. The Simpsons, Family Guy, even Twisters in 2024 wink at them. Old school trailers and concession ads were the prologue and intermission to 20th century life. They taught us to get hyped before the lights went down and to treat ourselves when they came up. So the next time that first trailer bass note hits, or you find yourself drifting toward the concession stand, the second the screen says intermission, smile. You're part of a ritual that's older than color television and catchier than any blockbuster's theme. Let's all go to the lobby. The treats and the memories are still waiting. So if you like lycanthropes, like, share, and subscribe. Contribute your thoughts and additional observations in the comments below. Let me know what I missed or what you noticed. Next, I plan on discussing Legend Has It from 2009. Keep your eye on the moon, a silver bolt in the chamber, and we'll see you back next episode.